fifth time.
Thanks, Mark. So let's get started. Sorry. So the world's a mess these days would be an understatement. The war in Ukraine continues. Inflation's running around 8%. Global growth is slowing. Bond market and the stock market have been getting hammered. Crypto's down considerably. Bankruptcies are on the rise. Supply chains are still a mess. China's still fighting their zero COVID battle, and financial conditions have tightened considerably. And through all that, our governments are not exactly leading to inspire confidence. So I thought it'd be interesting. I saw 2 surveys that came out recently, and I thought it'd be worth exploring them a little bit about the emotional well-being, because it drives so much about how consumers and businesses and governments spend, that it's important to take stock of where we are. So for those on the call, we've been on this theme of these 6 transformations all hitting at once. And it's a very complex set of events that are going on all at the same time that are creating some really deep disruptions. So today I want to talk about 2 surveys. One's from Gallup on emotional well-being, and the other is from the NFIB survey of small businesses. So let's jump right into it. Global unhappiness, that it's at a high level for the last 10 years, is not a surprise given what we've gone through just the last 2 with the war and the pandemic. But this is a problem that's been going on for about a decade. The rise in unhappiness globally. And there's 5 main factors that are driving that. Obviously, poverty. We still have 2 billion people living on insufficient income. That's a problem that we've made progress on, but we still have a long way to go. A lot of people have come out of poverty since the globalization took off in the 90s and 2000s, but still much more work to be done there. And actually, the elderly are getting increased levels of poverty, which is as they're living longer and healthcare issues rise. So that's another issue to focus on. Bad communities was fascinating from the report. And in the report, they highlight that another 2 billion people in the world are unhappy with where they live. And they're so unhappy that they wouldn't recommend that location to anyone they know. So another problem of the communities changing. And if you think about around the world, obviously you have countries like Syria and Yemen and Afghanistan where things are, a challenge a lot. But it's interesting that the bad community issue is a growing issue, and it's growing in large part because of displacements and forced displacements, but it's also because of the political divisiveness we're seeing around the world as well. Hunger, another issue. It was declining when globalization took off up until about 2014, but since then it bottomed out then and has been on the rise and continues to move up. And the pandemic and now the food problem coming out of the Ukraine and Russia is going to worsen that issue. So that's going to continue to drive unhappiness to record levels in this area, we believe. The fascinating one for me, and it came out of the kind of the blue as I was going through this, was loneliness. And the statistic they use is that about 330 million people go 2 weeks or more without talking to a single friend or family member. Just think about that for a minute. The population of the United States globally, 330, go 2 weeks without talking to anybody. Friend or family member. 1 in 5 don't have a single person they can count on for help. That's a tough place to be in a world that's shut down through pandemics, going through some of the emotional challenges that we're seeing with war and inflation and job security becoming a bigger issue again. Those are all important elements that play into it. And the last one of lack of good work. And the other fascinating thing from this survey was that they looked at the negative emotional impact of being miserable at your job. And they found that for many, it had a greater negative impact than not having a job at all, which is fascinating. Getting paid for doing something you hate was a more emotional challenge than not working at all, I think is a fascinating kind of number. So when you put it all together, the world has gotten really sloppy over the last several years, but more particularly the layering on of 2 big once in a kind of generation events of the war and the pandemic have really kind of distorted the world we live in and created these shocks to the system that are being absorbed and adopted. And I think that's the challenge that people are having right now. So let's switch to small businesses. And just for perspective, by the way, on the Gallup survey, it was 127,000 people from 122 countries were surveyed in late 21, early 22. So these are not really stale numbers, and you can imagine they're getting even worse because of what's going on around the world. So switching gears to looking at small businesses in the US, and this is a report put out by Gallup, by the NFIB, and they're looking at the small business optimism, and it's moving close to a low level for last several quarters. The average is right now around 93. The historical average since the survey was started 48 years ago is at 98. So this is down 5 months in a row, getting worse. You can understand why, but this is an issue that's going to start weighing on businesses. Another look at it is what is their expectations on general business conditions moving forward, and is this a good time to expand? So the dark line here is good time to expand, and as you can see, that's been coming down quite a bit since really when the pandemic started. It started to tick up a little bit, but we fear that that's taking another turn down right now. And the reason we fear that is because their expectations for general business conditions are at a 48-year low. This is the line, the thin line here, and you can see we've moved down to a negative 54% on the percent of people who think business is getting better versus minus the people who think it's getting worse. We're now at a negative 54, and that is a record number for the 48 years of the survey. What does that mean for businesses? It's gotten worse every month since January. They don't think it's a good time to expand. They're going to be pulling in the oars, and that means they're concerned about their CapEx, and that's going to pull in. So a lot of what we're seeing in the markets today, both public and private, is a reflection of the shifting expectations and the shifting outlook. So when we go to what's holding the small businesses back from what's weighing on their mind is the biggest problem, you can see the skyrocketing of inflation as this line has moved up here. And that is a pretty significant change. It is starting to come off its peak a little bit, which is a positive, but you can see that's a big issue. Breaking down these issues more closely, you can look at a year ago when we were talking about Build Back Better. Taxes were the second largest issue. Quality of labor was the first. Now taxes are down to only 12% of the respondents say it's the most important problem. Inflation jumps from 8 to 28%. And if you factor in cost of labor going from 8 to 12, inflation-related costs are 40% of the single most important problem, followed by quality of labor, and then by taxes and other areas. Regulations come down quite a bit as a concern because people are starting to worry about other things. But this is an important element. Why is this important? Because it means that for the average business, they're starting to slow hiring, they're lowering CapEx, they're starting to see their margins get squeezed. Not everyone has price inelasticity that they can pass on costs. So they're going to have to start lowering their earnings expectations. And this is starting to play through into the markets. So what do we think this means for the markets? Well, markets move on confidence, both directions. So when we're ebullient like we were a year ago, you saw what happened. When the confidence comes up, you see how quickly things can reverse. There's a lot of talk about recession. We might be in one now. We'll find out soon enough. But the real issue is not, are we in one or will we be in one? The real issue is the severity and the duration and how long this is going to last and what do we think is the likely outcome. For right now at ARS, our base case is not a deep recession, but it could be a little bit longer. We've just had a very short, snappy one last year with the pandemic. We're not going to have a bounce back like that. This could be several quarters of slogging along that we have to work through. The key issue is where are we in the inflation cycle and what does the slowdown that we're experiencing mean? I think inflation slowing businesses are feeding into business expectations, which is bringing back their spending and pulling back the oars like we had just talked about. I think that's going to take some of the pressures off of the inflation, particularly on wages. But we do have this gap of high inflation and lower wage growth puts people at a disadvantage. And one of the interesting things with the rapid pullback in the markets, the wealthy are losing their confidence fastest because they've gotten hit on real estate, they've gotten hit on public and private investments, and those that were fortunate enough to take the ride in some of the newer investments that we put out with last year also got hit with that. So the wealthy have usually carried us through recessions because of their spending, are also pulling in because their net worth is down considerably. So this is how it all connects and how it all plays through. And then you add to that the distortions that we're getting from the food and energy supply and the supply chain systems. It's going to make policy decisions more challenging. And with these concerns growing and the dissatisfaction from populations, you're going to have a whole series of challenges for governments. So they're going to get too short-term in what they do, including the Fed and central banks. Are they going to overreact to changes and recession fears and not kill inflation before they make adjustments? These are all things that are weighing on the markets. But I think the positive thing that's gone on here, and this is an important one to keep in mind, is that we have had a significant de-risking of the markets. We've also had a shift, a regime change from a Fed-led market with zero interest rates and the Fed put in place to one that's going to rely much more on fundamentals and valuation and the things that we used to do before the Fed and other central banks got involved in the great financial crisis and artificially stimulating the economy and trying to drive up inflation. So this is going to create a more natural market where the haves and have-nots will be clearer. Traditional valuation will matter more. The things that worked in the past couple of years where it's paying for future growth and high valuations is not going to be the ticket right now. And you're going to actually have to see businesses be much more disciplined. So for us, we see a slowing of the pressures that slowing growth is going to ease the pressures on the Fed and other central banks to raise rates. That doesn't mean we're calling for them to do a sharp reversal, because that's been a mistake in the past. It was a mistake in '75 when Arthur Burns tried to ease back on the rate cuts. He did them too soon, and that spurred another double dip. I think the Fed's going to just count on inflation peaking and then their ability to raise rates be lessened by the pressure to raise rates be eased. And that will be the sign that the markets can start to return to more normal opportunities. And that's when I think the markets will find their footing and start to move forward. How soon that happens depends on things that are really hard to predict right now. But best guess, we have probably into the fall, and then we'll be into midterm elections. And keep in mind, there are a couple inflationary pressures coming. You saw that with airline strikes in Europe. You're seeing it with potential Port of LA strikes and Port of Long Beach strikes. Rail strikes are another issue around the world that are starting to pick up. And the cost of getting the workers back in those labor negotiations will have a near-term push up in inflation. But we are starting to see a shift, and I think you're going to have to really be nimble and focused on where you're putting money to work. But the whole world's mindset is going to be going through some pretty dramatic shifts, and I think that's going to lead to more volatility in the near term. So Mark, I'm going to stop there and open it up for discussion.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Food for thought as always. Questions, comments?
Hey, Stephen, I hadn't thought about this question until you started talking. What about what is happening over in Holland with the farmers protesting about the policies imposed to restrict agricultural production across a number of different venues? Is that, have you seen that? Are you aware of that?
I've not seen it, not aware. I wish Eddie was on the call, because he would have a better view on that than I would. He's up on the farming, particularly over there. So,
well, now they're protesting. They've shut down highways. They are, to their credit, dumping manure in front of government buildings, stuff like that. So
he's in Holland right now.
Yeah,
I'll try him.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell him we need an answer now.
Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on that one. I do think where unions have the upper hand, they're going to try and use it. The question is, do they overplay it or not? And how does that all work out? Because, there's going to be backlash to everyone who feels like there's profiteering going on in a crisis. Not that workers asking for fair wages is necessarily that, but the mindset of the world is so fractured and fragmented right now that I think people have to be really careful about how they act and react to things that are going on, because we're in one of those crazy states where people are highly emotional, and it's going to be very highly charged for a while.
Yeah, my sense was, and I just quickly read an article, was it wasn't really so much a wage issue, was that, you know, it's sort of policy issues that just probably driven by environmental concerns to.
Tim, Eddie will be on in 10 minutes. So what other questions?
Ironically, on that though, the second part, Mark, is Gallup came out with a survey today of the 16 leading US institutions and the views on them. And if I can find it on the shared screen here, here it is. Let me just pull this up for 1 sec. This is today, this is a survey of their confidence in the major institutions. They look at 16 of them, and only 2 of the institutions, small business and the military, have a greater than 60% approval rating of, they have a great deal of confidence or quite a bit of confidence in them. Everything else is under 50%. The police dropped. Even the medical system is not high. And if you go down the list, Congress, the news, all that big business are, you know, below 20%. It's not a great look for the country. And I think that's, Tim, I think part of what people are reacting to around the world.
I just wanted to speak a bit about this global emotional stability and just the loneliness. I mean, there are loneliness ministers in the UK and Japan now. So, I mean, governments are starting to look at this as really impacting our future. And I just feel like this lack of community is like a core issue that maybe doesn't get as much focus, in the fact that we're living longer, yet we're often unhappier. And that's a strange combination. And I just want to share a little anecdote. I was talking to someone about just homeless people, and the person said to me, homeless people don't necessarily run out of money, they run out of relationships. And that just stuck with me as maybe indicative of kind of some of the things that we're going through as a world culture. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. But ultimately, this gets downstream to markets and how we think about what we're going to invest in and what's important to us.
Joel, I found the loneliness issue fascinating from this survey, that you think about that many people going that long without talking to anyone or not having anyone to count on. When you're going through the kind of emotional roller coaster the world's gone through the last couple of years, it's really disturbing. And with the demographic shifts and the living longer, it's going to be very tough lifestyles for a lot of people for a long time.
We were in Greenwich whenever it was, a week or so ago, and someone was talking about after school apps. And I was like, what happened to after school climbing trees? And like being with, like, playing baseball randomly. The metaverse, yeah, I think it's just, we're shutting our kids out or limiting it to very small doses. This FOMO that's created out of that too.
And does social media add to loneliness, or does it bring them closer together, is a question that I think really needs to be looked at.
No, it's the
I
echo.
think that people compare themselves to other people's they compare their insides to other people's outsides. And it's never a fair comparison. I mean, we think about ourselves and we look at all of this front that everyone's putting up and we think we're not worthy. I mean, I think that's what happens to kids and people in general.
It also diminishes their ability to, be social. We're primates at the end of the day, right? If you're on this machine that doesn't give much back or doesn't give you any social cues, it really ends up destroying your empathy, right? You don't know how to react to things in a proper way because you don't have that lived experience.
Also, having everything at the press of a button doesn't really help. So this these new technologies in terms of delivery to your home, everything in matter of minutes, and Amazon. And I think the structure of the whole world recently, with this, just a press of the button, you can get anything in a matter of minutes, became brought actually people to that halt of laziness. And therefore it's much easier just to, have this device in our hands and just order something or press something, and everything is at the doorstep. And that's where community actually disappears. So I can also do exercising at home. Why would I have to go to the gym? So all of this is just kind of pushing us to be even more lonely, even though it might appear that we are part of community, but that's online community and it's not real. You don't have, when you switch off that call or whatever, Zoom, whatever that is, you're alone at home. And that's the main problem. Also, tolerance has just gone down. So lots of couples are getting divorced, and no one wants to really tolerate anyone anymore. So it's kind of better and easier to be lonely. Dating apps as well, that's another massive issue. So it's just that consumerism, which is just instant, doesn't lead to anywhere. And yet we are investing in that. So we as investors are also supporting that in a way, because there is a backflip of that. Let's just make money very quickly, but we don't think about consequences later on. And there is quite, if I may just add this, there is quite an interesting banker who just posted something on LinkedIn the other day, when in the middle of the meeting, she just said, a cyclist is a disaster to the country's economy. He doesn't buy cars and doesn't borrow money to buy. He don't pay insurance policies, don't buy fuel, don't pay for the car serviced, and no repairs needed. He doesn't use paid parking, doesn't cause any major accidents, no need for multi-lane highways. He is not getting obese. Healthy people are not necessarily of use to the economy. They're not buying the medicine. They don't go to hospitals or doctors. They add nothing to the country's GDP. So on the contrary, each McDonald's store creates 30 jobs, actually 10 cardiologists, 10 dentists, 10 dietitians and nutritionists, obviously, as well as the people who work in the store itself. So it's quite interesting view on all of this. And, we, I guess, as society, have to really sit and think before we put money in. And it's not all about profit, it's about what we create with that. So, yeah.
Mark, I think Natalie had a great point in the chat room about the family unit too.
Oh, Natalie, go ahead and raise it. I haven't looked at the chat here.
I have a quick question for Stephen. Stephen, do you have any more in-depth information on that loneliness factor across geographies? Are we all the same across countries?
No, and actually that's funny, because I don't have the detail on that one specific one, but one of the interesting things is where there were the most positive countries with the most positive experiences were actually, it was fascinating, on the list, the number one country for positive experience was Panama. And out of the top 10, 5 of them were Latin American nations, which are not known for their economic strength right now. And with a lot of political turmoil and other things, so that when you see some of the Latin American nations, happiness is viewed differently by different people. And I think that gets back to part of what Mariana was talking about with, the materialistic side of it versus, are you just happy in your experiences? Are you having good, positive experiences every day? So I found that element fascinating too, because you have Indonesia, who you might expect, or Iceland or Denmark, countries like that you'd expect on the list, but El Salvador or Nicaragua or Honduras or the Philippines wouldn't necessarily be top of the list for people viewing as having positive experiences. So I think it is interesting the way each society operates and interacts, how different it is. And one of the things, we can't put our own views on somebody else.
So we talked about this in the Israel deep dive last week, those who were there. And Israel ranks high. There's some of those companies or countries you were mentioning there, Stephen.
Mhm.
Trying to figure out why Israel creates innovation. And that was one person's answer. But Natalie, you wanted to make a point?
Well, it's just that I met with an attorney that works within the foster care system, and she shared with me that over 90% of the kids that are taken from their homes are taken because of neglect, not abuse. So if we took that money that's being spent, $7.8 billion a year that's being spent on that system, and put it into strengthening the family unit, yeah, the child's neglected because mom and dad are working 2 or 3 jobs and trying to keep up. Kid is sitting in front of the TV. The neighbor calls Child Protective Services because she knows that they're alone, and the child is taken away. What if we put the money on the other end, got back to strengthening the family unit, having those kids where they need to be, having society recognize that, yeah, if we get that home life right, it's going to spill over. You're going to see it in the schools, you're going to see it in the juvenile justice system. But evidently there's no money in family preservation.
Well, back to societies. What societies appreciate this, where we could have empirical evidence?
Well,
I'm sorry, Mark, what did you say?
Well, let's say countries or cultures that appreciate the family investment in family. Maybe we can find empirical evidence and try to shed light on that.
Confucian culture is very much focused on the
Yeah, it would,
filial
it
piety.
would be,
Sorry, which
it's
one?
doable. But someone would have to want to put in the time and energy and research in order to present that information.
I'm guessing now that someone has. Just Joel, who was making a comment?
I was suggesting, Confucian culture is very much focused on the family unit, and everything is
I can't hear him.
Yeah, you need to speak up, Joel.
Okay, can you hear me now?
A little better.
That's interesting. I usually don't have this problem. I was just going to say that Confucian culture is very much focused on the family unit, and everything is really based around the dinner table and the relationships that are formed in these kind of 5 cardinal relationships. And so, as much as we look at China as kind of a state that is doing some awful surveillance type things, there still is a strong connection of the family in China, and filial piety, and this elder worship, and things that don't always translate into Western culture in the same way.
Yeah, but does that, sorry to chip in, I'm from Bangladesh, but doesn't that mean that the problem that exists, persists for longer because, it just gets transferred down the generations?
Which problem do you mean?
I mean, you mentioned something about, getting everyone around a dinner table and basically, I guess, keeping cohesive narrative going. Okay, and doesn't that, no, this is the way things we have done for hundreds of years. It's a thing that, we here, in Bangladesh face a lot, oh yeah, your grandfather did it this way, your father did, why would you change? The problem keeps on persisting. That's my, I'm all for families, by the way, obviously, but, it's just certain elements, of the right mix between the West and the East. Maybe that's what we're looking for, but, yeah. That's it.
Fair enough. I think you're talking about 2 different points, but someone was talking about Holland. So here comes Eddie. Somewhere there. Eddie, you look like you're still in New York with a field behind you. We're hoping to see authentic Holland, but anyway, Tim, ask your question again now that we have Eddie with us.
Eddie, what's going on in Holland with the agricultural protests? I can't remember around which city it is, but they are blockading highways. They are dumping fertilizer material in front of government buildings. It seems to be spreading to other regions. It's all a reaction to what they view. I think my understanding is it's a reaction to what they view as kind of overreaching governmental policies that are going to kind of constrict the agricultural sector of the economy in Holland. Thoughts?
That's correct. Yeah. Our country, as you know, is very small and highly regulated in many instances, even though we're very liberal as a country. But because we're so small and there's so many people per square mile, you have to sort of put some parameters in place. So the backdrop is that Holland has 4x the amount of sort of N2 and NOx as every other European country per acre. And most of that is driven by agriculture and particularly manure, which is mostly a driver of the ammonia. I think that's the English word, ammonia, N2. And so it produces something like 75 billion kilos times 2.2 in tons, in pounds. And so as a result of that, the government has said, okay, let's restrict that amount because otherwise we don't live up to our climate accord. And unlike a lot of other countries, the climate accord, Paris, is actually kind of important in most European countries and more sort of prevalent in the local law as well. And most people agree. However, that's constricting a lot of farmers from sort of expanding, and they're the ceiling they view as too tight. And smart as they are, they organize and fairly easily have been able to block all kinds of road access and roadways to distribution centers. And what ensues is a bit of a mess. And so you have Farmers Association on one end protesting very effectively and efficiently. And on the other hand, the rest of the Netherlands who says, or most people who said, look, this is a problem we need to solve together. And so there need to be fairly stringent measurements in place. And so what we typically do as a country is then combine all those things and try to make an agreement whereby the farmers somehow get compensated, or there's somehow a rule that is restrictive, but over time gets a little subsidies out. Obviously, farmers only make up maybe 2% of the population, so it's not a large number of farmers, but they do make a lot of mess in terms of environmental concerns. And so that's what probably will happen after sort of quite a heated exchange on both sides that leads nowhere. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah.
Eddie, may I ask a question? And forgive my ignorance. This may be a dumb question. With so much manure, can't you export that as fertilizer?
I think there's a couple of startups working on that. It's kind of interesting, but I don't know the real answer to it in that extent, to the extent I can do that in large quantities. I think in small quantities you can. You have to process it. In the Midwest, I think there's a couple of companies that do that, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, they have actually subsidies for that also, to find manure and make biofuel out of it. So actually, I turn that into a question for the group. If you find me companies that do that efficiently, I want to invest in those. It makes sense to me.
Keep on digging.
Will do. As they say, my shit don't stink.
So, well, thanks for taking a time out of your vacation, Eddie.
Yeah, don't worry at all. When it's questions on my country, I always take. It's an interesting thing.
I know. Even when you do fun facts around lunch, you always somehow weave it back into Holland. So I knew you'd. And I saw your text.
I'm back next week, guys.
Yeah. Well, we're having lunch next week, as you'll see on the 14th, a different venue. It'll be 41st and 3rd. Pete Thurlow will be hosting. He can take up to 40. And the theme will be about innovation. Who's your favorite entrepreneur or innovator today, among other things? And Newport, we will have pickleball. It's an easy train to Providence. Van it, carpool it down 40 minutes to Newport. We've got a got some Airbnbs, although there are a lot of hotels. It's not that hard as far as, it's not like Miami and some of the other places we've been. And yeah, we'll be then off to the Hamptons. Salt again, for those who remember, London we're gearing up for. But on the in Newport and in Hamptons and in London, we are going to keep doing this survey and building. And I thought, Bill, you did a great job collating into a nice graphical form what our community was thinking about macro and micro changes. And we want a lot of ideas of how to we want to get hundreds of people to get their input so we get the benefit of that. Jack Wyant, you want to say something?
Mark,
Yes.
amidst these penetrating and important global issues, it's appropriate to convey to the group that's on this session that we have someone on her maiden voyage participating with us. Crystal Falkner is a rock star based in Cincinnati, who is a business radio show host of some multi-decade duration weekly radio show, helping the entrepreneurial ecosystem be up to date on what's happening. She also is a practitioner of EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating Systems, and has written a book called Traction, which is an execution or implementation of EOS, which is widely known, but she's one of the leading practitioners in the world. And she's an accountant, a tax accountant, leader of a major accounting firm that we've happened to have worked with for almost 40 years. And she's on this call, and therefore I'm so overwhelmed with her maiden voyage that I thought others should be aware of it and consider whether when I say three, there should be an applause in unison welcoming her to the group. 1, 2, 3.
That was me and Jack.
How about the global applause that just
everyone's
occurred?
on mute.
It's on mute.
Everyone's on mute, Jack. That for a reason.
Yeah, well, listen, it's no problem, because it's what they thought and felt, not what they did, that's important.
Well, Crystal, welcome. I don't know if you're able to unmute or come on video. You're welcome to do so. And I'm glad that you could join. I didn't know you. Your fun fact is you've had a radio show for decades, so we'll have to.
Well, and she did it before it became popular. And she did it because she's a person of mission who's committed to advancing enterprises, particularly in entrepreneurial ecosystems.
Right. She may not know that she has to hit *6 to come off and unmute if she wants to say something. But
yeah, it's either that.
All right, I did.
Here she is. Hi, Crystal.
So Jack, hi guys, thank you so much. And Jack, you are amazing. Oh my goodness. And you all know this, right? But Jack is the legend, right? He's the one, and he may have just overstated a couple of things. First, I need to clarify. I did not write the book Traction. I wish I had, but I didn't. I am a certified EOS implementer, longtime CPA, own my own business, and we have had a radio show for more than 2 decades. But when you're a company that allows you, if a radio station, because we did a TV stint, we have a weekly column that we do as well. And if somebody's going to let you go on and say an expert for free as a small business, you got to do it, right? And call you an expert and let you have this kind of education-based marketing for free. That's a cool thing. But I appreciate you all allowing me to join. Jack said wonderful things about this group. I've found this conversation very interesting. I'm literally winding up my own vacation down here in Florida. And so I'm listening from my cell phone because I was coming from another event
Sure.
or another activity. So bottom line, I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. And this has been, so far, this call has been just eye-opening to me. So thank you very much.
Super.
Welcome,
And thank
Crystal.
you, Jack.
Ann, go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, welcome, Crystal. This is Ann Mooney Thrilled to have you be part of the Cincinnati contingent for 361. Welcome to the family.
Oh, thank you so much, Ian. I really enjoyed these conversations so far. So thank you. And thank you, Jack. You're wonderful.
And if anybody else is new, let us know. I see Marius. Haven't seen Marius. You're heading to Ukraine today. Right? Good to see you.
No, tomorrow. But I'm right now on the way to Berlin to get some stuff which I got donated from the network, and then going further to Ukraine.
Well, of course, I'm curious to meet somebody you call like the Mark Sainer of some country, but I feel bad for him. But what do you want to share with us today?
Oh my God. Okay. So I'm on the way to a conference which is for the future of Ukraine and the world, and I got invited from the inner circle of my Ukrainian friends. So I have totally trust that it's worth to go there. And I'm gonna take somebody who just stumbled upon my way. She's gonna drive. She's a extraordinary entrepreneur, and she also gave me kind of cash for buying stuff which we usually buying, the stuff with wind-up radios and so on. But she's also come with me. She's very much in the kind of getting shit done thing for mindset. Yep. And this guy I was talking to, the Mark Sainer, the Polish Mark Sainer, yes. So he coincidentally is now facilitating the main hub where all the American goods are arriving in a Polish border, and he was hosting from Biden over Branson and so on, and they had panels and so on. And right now he will organize a worldwide concert paid by Branson and other billionaires for getting money for Ukraine. So just as a few points.
When is it? Let's support them.
I think it's in October. The thing is, I don't have the dates on my time. And he's also organizing, and the funny thing is, really, I don't know if it's a coincidence. He's organizing exactly what you're doing, but for the Polish diaspora, yes. And his organization is called 60 Millions.
60 millions. Well,
why?
Millions.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
Yes, and you know why? Because there are 60 million people Polish people on the planet, 40 in Poland, and the rest as diaspora all over. And he shared with me the agenda for a conference. Also getting a Ukraine panel there in Gdańsk. Yeah, and basically the topics what you are doing with the 361 summits is basically one-to-one the same things, right? The same topics from real estate over hemp, everything the same. I thought like it's not possible. It's really not possible.
Well, that's awesome. Well, let's connect. And
I mean, if you want him to give you a few sentences, he can jump in right now on this call and introduce himself. Yeah.
Another Marius wants to speak, apparently.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, you see me in my pajamas. It's around midnight in Singapore. I'm isolated due to COVID-19, which I got in Indonesia 2 days ago.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I'm one of the 60 million of Polish diaspora.
There you
really?
Go. A Polish diaspora in Asia for more than 30 years.
Well, so is Wanda, right?
Sorry?
Yeah.
So is Wanda Lopich.
Yeah. Another one from 60 million.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, so Polish diaspora holds quite many apartments in Poland for investment purposes. So I've been trying to raise awareness among them, and actually I managed to get some apartments for Ukrainians. We have about 3 million of Ukrainian refugees, in addition to, I believe, 1 million or 2 who had been working in Poland before the war. As you may know, or you may not know, but we don't have refugee camps in Poland. They all live mostly in people's apartments, in apartments of volunteers.
Well, I'm glad that you raised that. And I guess that Zbigniew is on, but connecting to audio. Is he in the same car with you, Marius?
No,
sorry.
He's in Warsaw.
Okay. So Zbigniew, welcome. Can you hear us? They've lost us.
There's always a problem with being in Teams, because we've been on a Teams call before. I'm gonna invite them, and you need to create the app, otherwise you have audio problems.
Yep, yep. Okay. Well,
yeah.
This is, let's connect, let's support each other, 60 millions and the rest, particularly. But I was telling everybody earlier, if you can see the schedule, we're going to be in London on the 19th, 20th. Oh, I see. We don't show. Well, that's interesting. We don't show our Germany trip and Zurich, but I was telling you, Stephen, that I could try to restrain myself, but my instinct was to go to Poland and Ukraine. But I know. But we'll see where that goes. But with the help of Maria's 1, 2, and 3, and Wanda and others, it might come about. Not already has to go.
I'm not going to drive for that one.
No. Well, look,
Stephen, I have to tell you that the roads in Poland are in better shape than those on Long Island, if this is an incentive.
That's a low bar.
So maybe Zbigniew comes back soon. Anyone else want to weigh in on the investment philanthropy events? Or otherwise, we're going to have to drop this in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Anyone else?
No.
Bill, you've come on.
Mark,
Yeah, Adam, go.
Yeah, I've got a quick question for Stephen. Stephen, well, actually 2 questions. That loneliness survey, was that in the Gallup?
It was part of the Gallup. Yep.
Interesting.
Yes.
And you can share that, right? We can get that?
Yeah, the Gallup Global Emotions Report, I'll try and put in the chat now if I can.
Okay. The other question I have, disposable income, how has that changed over the past year? And are you seeing a deterioration in that?
I have to check that number. I did see that the savings rate dropped below where people thought it was going to drop to. So I think that's one of the issues that is coming up, that we are between the savings decline and the net worth decline of the wealthy. You could see the spending come in considerably, which will flow into then business spending. And I think that's part of what the financial conditions index from the NFIB was showing, that they're expecting that spending is going to be pulled in by corporations and consumers.
But the disposable income of consumers is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I don't have that number, but I think it's getting
deteriorating.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. Thank you. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you,
Stephen. Thank you.
I'll put the survey in and you can see all the mistakes I made with it. So let me see, it should go through to everyone.
Yeah, I think I see it.
Okay.
Super.
Yeah, I saw it. Just downloaded it.
Look, just so everyone knows, I'm going to be with family this week. So tomorrow, the next day, no 10:30s. But I know that many of you are getting together to mobilize or coordinate on events, and that's great. You will be hearing from me off and on. Yeah, so if you need me, better ping me today than any other day. And but we're gearing up for Newport, some other new systems you'll see soon. Jim or Anessa, anything you want to say before we break?
Nope, all good. Good to see everybody. Thank you, Stephen, as always.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone.
I think I do see Zbigniew if he wants to say hi.
I couldn't connect from my mobile, but finally I'm here. Good to meet you.
Marius, do you want to introduce him, but not like the 10-minute introduction that Jack does, but Real quick.
I mean, I did a short introduction right before this data set is basically the Polish clone of Mark, is my opinion. Yeah, just in the short introduction we had. But Zbigniew, maybe you just give kind of a few data about yourself, like, and what you're doing, what you've been involved in, the two conference or the conference and the other thing you're
we have 60 seconds for 60 million.
Okay, so we just spoke with Mariusz about two projects, and that's how it come out that maybe we should talk together and connect. We have a project for 5 years. We do a 60 million Congress, which is a Congress for Polish people and Polish living abroad mainly, but also with the relations to the other nations. And our target is to build a healthy network or between the businesses around the world. And we did these congresses in Miami, Buffalo, New York, London, Berlin, Rzeszów, and now in August we do the next edition in Gdańsk. And that's because of friends. I just got the contact with Mariusz, and we spoke today, and it looks that maybe those two initiatives, what you're doing, probably I will have to know more. That there is a possibility to work together to join our forces.
Absolutely.
And the second, and very shortly, because just to mention that also we have another project. We were talking with Mariusz. I have one of the companies. We are managing G2A Arena, which is a Congress Center in Rzeszów, which is a region close to the Ukrainian border, and we have 82nd Airborne, American troops there, and Joe Biden was visiting there, and all the big foundation like Howard Buffett. And last week we just met with Richard Branson, and we will organize 17 to 19 of October World for Ukraine Summit with those big guys together with us. And so these are two projects we are talking about.
So Wanda is part of your 60 million, and then another Marius, he just left, was in Singapore. It's part of your 60 million, and I'm from Cleveland, which we have our fair share of Poles as well. But well, welcome. We'll support you. Let's support each other. It's all about leveraging and trying to do things better and more effective, particularly on the philanthropy side. So welcome, brother from another mother, apparently. And thank you, everybody, and we'll be in touch, Zbigniew.
Thanks, take care.